Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Randy, this is Bike Works. I'd like to go over a couple things real quick before we get started. Number one, if you're that dude that's sitting in his chair right now watching this video saying, I know this and I know that and I can do everything, this video may not be for you. The next thing is, yes, that is wood paneling behind me. And don't get your hopes up, this isn't a 70s cheesy porn and you're not going to see some naked lady come running around the corner. With all that out of the way, this is a couple things that I like to do. This is getting your bike ready for the riding season. Now there's a lot of things that we can go over, but this is literally just the basics for you guys that kind of want to know a little bit more about what to do. First thing I like to do is go front to back. You got to have a starting point and ending point. When looking at any tire, a couple things you want to look at is look for any weather checking or dry rotting or cracking. Anywhere from, this inside bead to the outside bead here. You're really looking in this area because when you get side flex on it, that's the first spot it's going to want to blow out on you. When checking tread depth, what I like to do is get one of these cheap gauges from, say, O'Reilly's or anywhere. They're pretty much, you can get them anywhere, use them anytime, throw them in your saddlebag, keep them in your pocket, whatever you want to do. So don't really care too much about the color codes on it. What you're looking for is the numbers. So you just put it flat on the tire, push it in until it seats into the center part. You want to pull it out and read it. This one here is at about 3/32. I don't really much care to run a tire under, say, 2 or 2.5. All right, this is a brand new tire in comparison to the one we just checked the gauge on. Every tire is a little bit different with the tread pattern and tread depth, but on this one, we're still looking at somewhere around 5/32 of an inch to 6/32 of an inch. So that's from brand new. Now with the old tire, remember it was set at about 3/32 of an inch. If you really look at that, it's really not far off from showing the red. That's why I said forget about the color codes on these. I don't personally like to run a tire down underneath of about 2/32 of an inch, just because I like to keep good tread on a tire. If you're going to use it and use it the way it's supposed to be done, you need tread. So don't run one tire super low like that. Okay, now moving on to the air pressure. Different tire manufacturers, different recommendations for air pressure. Personally, I like to see a front tire on a bike like this somewhere in the 32 to 34 pounds. This one here is right at 32 pounds of pressure. I'd consider that a good pressure to run. Now if you're running a full-size bike, a touring bike, a heavy bike, you could bump that pressure up to around 36, 38 pounds of pressure and get a little bit more stability out of it. But I wouldn't run any tire on whatever size motorcycle less than 30 pounds of pressure. Next thing I like to do is move back to the brakes. Brakes are a vital part of your motorcycle. I'd say even more vital than the thing starting up and running at times. So a couple things I like to do is grab the handle just real quick, make sure there's adequate clamping force on it. You want good distance between the lever and the throttle when you pull the lever back, so you're not dead ending into the lever or dead ending into the handlebar at any point in time. You want good clamping force. Now I'm not going to teach you how to bleed the brakes or anything, but what we want to check for is just having adequate level in the reservoir here and just to make sure the color of the fluid itself. Different colors are different fluid levels. Dot 5 sometimes it's purple, sometimes it's brownish yellow. Dot 3 and dot 4 are supposed to be clear. What you don't want is a just dirty brown one. You don't want any gumminess, you don't want anything built up on the inside around the cap here. All that's going to be indicative of bad fluid. Bad fluid is going to result in bad braking and breaking down of your hoses, and you really need your brakes at any given time. So you want to make sure that this is done and checked at least annually. Okay, so here it is all opened up. This spot right here normally on a Harley is where you would gauge how full it is, but normally you've got it over on the kickstand. So with it down right now, it's got adequate brake fluid in it. If you do this and look, you can see it's got good color. It's not brown and it's not looking like it's broke down. Now, some people think to have a full reservoir, it has to be plumb full all the way to the top. That's actually inaccurate. You need some air gap space at the top of it so when you let off the brakes, the brake fluid has a chance to return back into the reservoir. If it's all the way full, the brakes won't return. You could possibly have a circumstance where the brakes lock up on you. So it doesn't have to be plumb full coming out of the top. All right, moving on to the rear brake reservoir. This particular model, it's down here by the pedal. Other bikes have different locations for them. You're just going to have to find it on your particular model. Again, you want to check for pedal travel. You want to make sure it doesn't overextend your foot. You need to be able to put enough clamping force down with your foot to where you can adequately apply enough brake pressure. Again, the reservoir is right here. I've already loosened the caps, but here it is. We've got a good level. Again, we've got good color into it. So I'd say that there's nothing that needs to be done with this. Now again, if you ever spill any of this brake fluid out on anything, I always take a little bit of 409 and a good clean rag, wipe it up and clean it down with that. We don't want to ruin any paint. We don't want to do anything like that to it. Also, on almost every cap here, it has what dot of fluid that it is, dot 3, dot 4, dot 5. If you do happen to top it off, do not mix the fluids. Bad things can happen when you start to mix them. The brakes don't want to work like they're supposed to. So definitely look on this before you decide to fill it up and just top it off. But remember, you need a little bit of air gap in the top for the fluid to return back into the reservoir. The next thing I like to do is move back to the air filter and check that. The reason why the air filter to me is somewhat important is it does have performance issues if you have a dirty air filter. Also fuel mileage issues if you have a dirty air filter. This particular bike has an open filter on it, so other bikes will have a big side cover on it or a air filter cover on it. You might have to take that off to actually inspect the cover, or the filter rather. Now on this one, this is a brand new filter. It looks brand new. There's good color into it. The inside the veins isn't filled with bugs or dirt or anything like that. Some of the other paper filters are white or green or orange. What you want to look for is any buildup of dirt or grime or dust deep down in these veins. If you have a lot of that built up, go ahead and just replace it now. Usually they're not too terribly expensive, pretty easy thing to do, plus it'll get a lot better performance and fuel mileage if you do that. Now, this is a rechargeable filter. I'm not going to go through the steps on how to recharge one, but normally they come a good deep red or a good pink color. As these start to dry out, they'll turn white or turn black. Follow the process in the recharging kit to recharge your air filter, but it's definitely something I would look into before you hit the riding season. The next thing we're going to look at on this motorcycle is the engine oil and the transmission oil. A couple things I like to check obviously is the fluid level itself. Plus we want to look at just how the oil looks. Too dirty of oil might be causing engine issues later on down the road, so it's something you might want to get checked out and or changed out before we hit the riding season. On this particular model, it's normally checked on the side stand. This has got good color. I don't run these all the way full to the top just because I don't like ones that are full all the way to the top. You kind of have some running issues. Plus on this model, if you overfill it, it ends up coming out this spigot. So on this particular model, I run it just a little under the full line. Now there's a fine line between a little under and a quart low. Almost all dipsticks have a low add line and or a full line. You definitely want to be in between those. Down here is the transmission on this particular model. Some metric model motorcycles and some other brands of motorcycles don't have a separate transmission, so you're going to check that. You definitely have a motorcycle book or manual that comes factory with it. Otherwise, we'll have to. You could take it to a shop or your dealership, or try to find it on the internet on where you can check it and how full it's supposed to be. Whether you have an engine oil that does all your transmission, your primary, and your engine, or if it's like a Harley where there's 3 separate ones. So on this particular one, again, we're looking for fluid color and fullness. This one's right at the full line and the color is perfectly clear on it. The next thing we're doing with this particular motorcycle is the rear brake pads. I definitely like to actually check them out, look at them, try to get my eyeballs on them if it's a disc brake setup where you can actually see the pads. Now this particular model, there's a backing plate here and then the pad surface. The backing plate is metal. You do not want to be within probably 1/8 of an inch of that metal. If you get close enough to 1/8 of an inch, you know you need to start replacing your brake pads as soon as you can physically do it. This one here has probably got about 20 to 30% life left on this pad, so we're not going to replace them. The next thing I like to do is actually get a hold of the rotor. What you're feeling for is any grooves or ridges, any abnormalities in the actual rotor itself. What you want it to do is try to feel as smooth as you possibly can. Now could be a little bit and a lot is a big difference. But the big thing is you want to feel the outside edge. You don't want very much of a ridge or a lip or anything there. If you can hang a fingernail on it, it's probably too much. The reason why that is as the pads start to wear and the rotor starts to wear, this is going to get thin through here. If it gets thin through here, you're going to lose your clamping force and lose travel in your brake cups. So what you want to do is have a good flat rotor, no big ridges, no big ridge at the top for the brake pads to catch on. Now, if both of those are all good, I'd say you're ready to ride. The next thing we're going to look at on this bike is the belt deflection. Now, any motorcycle, whether it be a Harley or metric or whatever it might be, if it's got a drive belt, this is about the same premise. The only thing that changes is sometimes the particulars. Harley recommends a certain tension and deflection, whereas other bikes might recommend something else. But what I like to do is just the layman's check. Normally everything's done on about 10 pounds of pressure. You want about 3/8 or so of deflection in the belt. What you're going to do is actually find a gauge. Some have a little cutout in it right here. It's where you can see what it actually is. This particular model doesn't. So you want to use your finger, push up until it gets tight with just moderate to light pressure. You don't have to bear down on it and try to push the thing through the top of the bike. But what you're looking for is a good 7/16 or so deflection in the belt. That lets you know that it's not too tight and going to cause any issues or squealing or want a belt break, and it's not going to be too loose. So right there, it's about perfect for this particular bike. Okay, keeping on with the belt, another key area you want to look at is actually the face of the belt. There's a bunch of little grooves and ridges in most all belts. But what you want to look for is in between those, if there's any dry rotting or cracking, any abnormality like that in the belt to let you know that that belt is dry and could possibly break on you. If it does break, you got more issues than just loss of power to the rear wheel. It could bind up, it could cause you to wreck. So it's kind of a key important part to look at is make sure this belt doesn't have any dry checking or dry rotting throughout anywhere on it. Yeah, you might have to roll the wheel or roll the bike to check the whole bike over, but it's worth the extra time to look at before you get going. The next thing we're going to look at on this bike is the shifting assembly itself and the kickstand. What I like to do is just check to make sure that there's good free-flowing motion in here. This is spring-loaded, which almost every motorcycle is. You want it to return back to a neutral position so you're not hanging the gear shifter in gear or out of gear. So what I like to do is make sure it moves freely, push it down, let it go. Pull it up, let it go. This one perfectly moves back to the neutral position. I don't see any issues with this, so there's no need to adjust it. Now, if you do have an issue, say you have one that goes down and stays down or comes up and stays up, you want to contact any type of a dealer or an independent shop like this one here to go over this with you. That way you know you can accurately shift between gears without causing any issues. Next thing I'm going to check on this bike is the kickstand itself. I know it seems stupid and seems simple, but you want to make sure that this thing travels accurately. But the most important thing is when you go to flip this up, the kickstand stays up. I see too many motorcycles running down the road where that spring's loose and they start hanging down like this. It may not cause any problems running in a straight line, but if you hang this thing down here and you go a corner or go through gravel or someone's yard and this catches, you got the potential for the kickstand to actually pull you over on the motorcycle. We'll make sure it comes out, accurately engages and returns, and the spring is working like it should. That to me is a good kickstand, and you're not going to have any issues out of it. Alright, the next thing I'm going to check on this bike is the clutch lever itself. You want very minimal, but you do need some free play in it. The reason why there's some free play before you start actually disengaging or engaging the clutch is because you don't want this to be so tight that your clutch discs are actually slipping going down the highway. The reason why that's a problem other than just wear is if that's slipping and you try to give a hard acceleration to say get out of do an avoidance tactic or get out of the way of somebody, you want to be able to accurately apply power to the rear wheel through the transmission and the drivetrain. So what I always like to do is make sure there's a little bit of free play and then make sure that the clutch lever actually travels the way that it should. You want a nice, smooth, flowing operation here. You don't want any catches or hiccups or anything like that. To me, this one here is perfectly working and does not need anything. The next thing I like to check on a motorcycle may not necessarily be all too about safety, but it does have to do with riding and how it actually rides and runs. This is a set of spark plugs. Top one here being a bad plug. This one being a good used one that you would pull out. This is a good coloration. Doesn't necessarily need to be replaced, and this is a brand new one. Now the reason why this is bad is because it is black, it's charred, it's got a lot of carbon buildup onto it. Something with that to be said is you might want to get an appointment with an independent shop or your dealer to figure out why your bike is running so rich and or passing so much oil, causing this plug to almost foul out. This one here has got a good light tan coloration to it. Light tan means it's got a good adequate air fuel mixture to it, and this one obviously is a brand new one. Alright, to wrap it all up, that's just a few of the hard points that we want to go over. Now obviously we're all free-thinking Americans and we can make our own decisions. You don't need me to tell you what to do or how to do something. However, a couple other things that you can go over and check, either get a buddy or not get a buddy, is you want to check the function of all your lights. You want to make sure your headlight works, high, low beam. You want to make sure your left turns work, your right turns work. You want to make sure your brake lights come on when the brakes are applied, both front and rear. You also want to make sure that your tail lights are on and you're on all the time. You don't have weird cutting in and out symptoms when you sit on the seat or anything like that. That's a couple other things you might want to go over. Also, something else to get your bike ready for the season is, depending on how you stored the motorcycle, you want to maybe put a little sea foam or anything into the fuel to stabilize it and or to clean any gunk out that you might have built up. Now, you may not have that issue. You might be able to run that gas, no issues, no problem, but running a good octane of fuel and maybe running a cleaner for the first tank is not a bad idea to get you going down the road. Now, as always, if you have any more questions or need anything done, I'm here at Bike Works. We're located at 3194 US Highway 65 in Urbana, Missouri. You can stop by anytime. Even if you don't have me do it, I'll be more than happy to talk you through it, work anything out with you. We're all motorcyclists here. Let's keep it on the road.